Today we're going to discuss histogram distribution, an interval frequency table, and a histogram for a set of data. Okay, so first thing we need to do is we need to get a set of data. So let's say we have 24 exam grades. So this is going to be our data. And we have the following numbers: 92, 88, 96, 100, 76, 88, 96, 72, 84, 80, 68, 76, 88, another 88, 86, 76, 100, 80, 72, 92, 88, 96, 80, and 84. Okay? So that is our data that we are going to be working with. Okay? So this is a large amount of data. There's 24 different numbers in this set of data. So when we have a set that is kind of large, and we notice that a lot of the elements, a lot of the numbers repeat themselves. For example, 88 keeps repeating itself, right? We see 88 a few times. So when this happens, we can make what is called a frequency distribution table. Okay, a frequency distribution table. Okay, and so the frequency distribution table has different columns. Okay, so the first column is the data column. Okay, and that is just the data arranged in numerical order. But what's important to know is that you don't have to repeat an element. Like, we're only going to have to write 88 once in that column. Okay, and the reason why is that the next column is going to be a tally column, right? So it's a column for tallies to count the number of times each entry appears, right? The tally column, which is going to count the number of times an entry appears. All right, so the next column that we have is going to be the frequency column. So the frequency column, you add up all the tallies and you put the number, the frequency of that element, okay, or that entry. Okay, so the frequency column represents the number of tallies. Okay. So at the bottom of the frequency column is the total number of data. Okay. So this is important to know. The number at the bottom is the total number of data. Okay, so you have a total row, all right? And then the last column is the product column. And the product column is the product of the numbers in the data column and the frequency column, okay? So the first column times the third column, right? So it is the product. Remember, product means to multiply. So product of the numbers in the data column and the frequency column. And the reason that we like the product column is because the number at the bottom of this column is the sum of all the data, which is important when we're trying to get something like the average, right? Okay, not only can we get the average, which remember is mean, but we also can get range, median, and mode all from this data, okay? So let's go ahead and look at what the frequency distribution table would look like for this particular data, right? So, again, remember we would have the data column and the tally column, the frequency column, and then of course we would have the product column. Okay, so we need to put, for the data column, remember we're going to put everything least to greatest, but we only have to put each entry once, right? So my smallest number on here looks like it's going to be 72. Oh, actually, there's one smaller than that. There's 68, right? And then there is 72, 76, 80, 84, 86, 88, 92, 96, and 100. So all of those appear. So notice how I wrote them only once, even though they appeared multiple times in my set, okay? Well, now we have to count how many times did they occur. 68 only occurred once, right? So I only have one tally mark, right? So its frequency is 1. 72 occurred twice, so frequency is 2. 76 occurred 3 times, so my frequency is 3. 80 occurred 3 times, so my frequency is 3. 84 occurred twice, so my frequency is 2. 86 occurred once, so my frequency is 1. 88 occurred 5 times, so my frequency is 5. 92 occurred twice, so frequency is 2. 96 occurred 3 times, my frequency is 3. And then 100 occurred twice, so my frequency is 2. So remember, at the bottom of the frequency column, we have to total the number of data, right? So all of these numbers added up, 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 3 plus 2 plus 1 plus 5 plus 2 plus 3 plus 2. If we add those all up, we get 24. Okay, now we do the product, right? So again, product is the entry, the data column, times the frequency column. So 68 times 1 is 68. Then you have to do 72 times 2. So 72 times 2 is 144. Then you do 76 times 3. 76 times 3 is 228. Then you do 80 times 3. 80 times 3 is 240. Guys, feel free for this particular lesson. If you want to use a handheld calculator, you are more than welcome to. Otherwise, you're going to have a lot of scratch work. So again, for this particular lesson, I will allow you to use a handheld calculator. So 84 times 2 is 168. 86 times 1 is 86. 88 times 5 is 440. 92 times 2 is 184. 96 times 3 is 288. And then 100 times 2 is 200. So remember, at the bottom of the product column, we have another total. So we need to add all these numbers up together. So 68 plus 144 plus 228 plus 240 plus 168 plus 86 plus 440 plus 184 plus 288 plus 200. Again, if you have a handheld calculator, that's the best way to go. We get the total 2,046. So remember, this total number here represents the if we were to add up this original set, if we were to add up all of these numbers together, we would get 2,046. Okay, so that's why a frequency distribution table is so important, because it gives us these numbers pretty easily. Okay, so let's find the range, mean, median, and mode for this data. Okay, so range is pretty easy because we already put it in order, right? Because remember, range is the largest number minus the smallest number. So 100 minus 68, which is 32. Then our mean, our average, well, remember, mean is the total divided by the number of entries. Well, we know that our total is this right here, the product total. So we have product total. And we know that the number of entries is the total in our frequency column. So the frequency total. So that gives us 2,046 divided by 24, and we get approximately 85.3. All right? So for our median, remember this is an even number of data, so we're going to take the halfway, right? It's 24, so half of 24 is 12, right? So we need the 12th score and the 13th score. So this is where you go up here and figure out what is the 12th score, okay? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So the 12th score was 86, which means that the 13th score would have been the next number, which is 88. So 86 plus 88, we're going to divide that by 2 to get our median. Remember, we're doing this because we have an even number of entries. If it was odd, we would just take the middle number, but it's even, okay? So 86 plus 88 divided by 2, we get 87. And then our mode is the number that occurs most often. We just can look at our tally, right? The most tallies we got was 5, and that was for the number 88. So our mode is 88. Okay, so now you can see how the frequency distribution table can get us all of the numbers that we want for our range, mean, median, and mode. So let's talk about a different type of table. Now we're going to talk about an interval frequency table. So an interval frequency table is not going to be as precise as a frequency distribution because you're doing intervals. You're not getting exact numbers. You're just getting intervals. However, if you have an extremely large amount of data, the interval frequency table is going to be the most useful for you. It's going to save you lots of time. Okay, so a histogram, what we call a histogram, is just another way to picture data, and it can be constructed from the information from an interval frequency table. So again, a histogram is constructed from the information found on an interval frequency table. Okay, so a histogram is made up of vertical bars that represent the frequency data in each particular interval. Okay, so the bars in a histogram are going to touch each other to show that we have all the numbers within that interval accounted for. So let's look at an interval frequency table first. Okay, so it's always going to have two parts. An interval frequency table is going to have two columns. It's going to have the interval column, and it's also going to have the frequency column. So how often do those numbers occur? So here, we're going to do age, which is our interval, and then we have frequency, the frequency that age occurs. Okay, so the first interval we have is ages 10 through 19. The numbers 10 through 19 occur 14 times, so our frequency is 14. Then we have 20 through 29. Okay, this occurred 10 times. 30 through 39 occurred 17 times. 40 through 49, 8 times. 50 through 59, 15 times. And then 60 through 69, 12. 70 through 79, 5. And then 80 through 89, twice. So then we have the total, right? The total frequency is 83 if we add those together. 14 plus 10 plus 17 plus 8 plus 15 plus 12 plus 5 plus 2. Our total number of entries is going to be 83. Those entries, though, we don't know what the exact entries are. We just know the intervals of those entries. So I want you to notice something about these intervals. These intervals are the same space, right? 10 to 19, 20 to 29, 30 to 39. These are all the same size intervals. You can't change sizes within your interval frequency table. If we were to calculate the range, we cannot get an exact range because these are intervals, right? We don't know the actual data. There might not actually be an 89. The last number might be 82, but it falls within the range 80 to 89, right? So we can't get an exact range. We can only get an approximate range, all right? So we can only get an approximate range. Okay, so to get it, we subtract the smallest value of the lowest interval from the largest value of this highest interval. So the largest minus the smallest. So 89 minus 10, and we get 79 for our range. But again, it's an approximate range. Okay, if we want the mean is actually more complicated to get because in order to get a mean, we need the product column, right? We need a product column. But to get a product column, we have to multiply the data times the frequency. But we don't have data. We only have the interval of the data. We have the frequency, but we don't have the data. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the midpoint of that interval and let that be our data. So we're going to take the midpoint of the interval for our data so we can multiply it by our frequency to get the product. Okay? So to get the midpoint, is you sum the beginning and ending values and then you divide by 2. So for example, our first one would be 10 plus 19 divided by 2. Our first midpoint would be 14.5. So again, we have midpoint, kind of making its own little column. So our first midpoint is 14.5. Then we would do 20 plus 29 divided by 2. We would get 24.5. Then 30 plus 39 divided by 2, we would get 34.5. Should start seeing a pattern here because all the intervals are the same. So now we have our midpoints. So remember, our midpoints are used so that way we can get a product column. I'm going to separate this a little bit. This is kind of on its own little information there. Okay. All right. So our product table. So remember, we get our product by multiplying the data, or in this case, our midpoint, times the frequency. So 14.5 times 14 gets us 203. 24.5 times 10 gets us 245. 34.5 times 17 gets us 586.5. 44.5 times 8 gets us 356. 54.5 times 15 gets us 817.5. 64.5 times 12 gives us 774. 74.5 times 5 gives us 372.5. And then we have 84.5 times 2 is 169. So now we can get our product total by adding all these numbers together. 203 plus 245 plus 586.5 plus 356 plus 817.5 plus 774 plus 372.5 plus 169 gives us 3,523.5. So now we've got a product total and a frequency total, which means we can get our mean. Because remember, a mean is simply the product total divided by the frequency total. So I'm going to write that out again. A mean is the product total divided by the frequency total. Remember, we learned that earlier, and it still works for the interval frequency table as well. So the product was 3,523.5. The frequency total was 83. And so this is where your calculator would come in super handy, and we get approximately 42.5 when we round to the nearest tenth. Okay, so now we have a mean. The median, since we don't have specific numbers, we just have an interval, your median is going to be an interval instead of a single data. So we want the interval that contains the middle number. So again, when we talk about a median, it's going to be an interval. Why? Because we don't have data. We only have intervals, right? So it's going to be the interval that contains the middle number. So if we know that there are 83 numbers, because that was our frequency total, then we just need to know what the middle number is, right? So the interval that contains the middle number is first rounded by finding the position of the middle value, okay? So when your frequency is odd, you can just do your frequency plus 1 divided by 2, okay? So that means since we have 83, it would be 83 plus 1 divided by 2, which means we get 42, right? So we need the 42nd number, okay? So let's look at our intervals, right? The first interval has 14 numbers in it, okay? So again, we're looking for the 42nd. So we've got 14 numbers in the first interval. The second interval has 10. We're up to 24. We're looking for the 42nd. The third interval has 17. That's 41. We're super close, but remember, we're looking for 42, okay? So that means that we're looking for the fourth interval. And the fourth interval is 40 to 49, okay? Which means that our median is 40 to 49, because that is where the 42nd number lies, which is the median for this data. All right, so next thing we want to do is we want to go ahead and find the mode. Because we don't have data, we have intervals, we are going to calculate what's called a modal interval, which is the interval that occurs most often, okay? So that's the largest, has the largest frequency. So the interval that has the largest frequency would be the one with 17, which is between 30 and 39. So our answer is the interval 30 to 39. All right. Last thing we want to do is to create the histogram for this data. So again, the histogram is going to have the intervals going this way. So this is age. And then it's going to have the frequency here. So in this case, our frequency is just the number of people that fall within this age range. Okay, so the first interval was 10 to 19. Then we have 20 to 29, 30 to 39, 40 to 49, 50 to 59, 60 to 69, 70 to 79, 80 to 89. Almost out of room, not quite. Okay, and then number of people. This is where you just look at your frequency. Our frequency goes from 2 all the way up to 17. So let's count by 5s all the way up to 20, right? So here's 5, 10, 15, 20. All right, so 10 to 19 people, that interval has 14 people in it. So we're going to go all the way up to 14 and color that in. The interval 20 to 29 people, or the age 20 to 29 had 10 people. So we're going to go to 10 and shade in. Notice how that my vertical bars are right next to each other, because it shows that this is all the numbers between 10 and 19. This is all the numbers between 20 and 29. We're not leaving anything out. Our intervals go back to each other. 30 to 39 have 17 people. And then 40 to 49 had 8 people. And 50 to 59 had 15 people. And 60 to 69 had 12 people. '70 to 79 had 5 people. And then 80 to 89 had just 2 people. All right, there is our histogram. All right, guys, you're going to try 2 through 6 evens on 10.3.